Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 3 of 7 podcast. This is Chad. We've got a really special guest on today, Mr. Scott Worthington. Scott has been a mentor for me over the last probably 2 years of my life. Scott is a very accomplished businessman, husband, father. He's also the race director for the Revenant and 85 South, which is a new adventure race he's putting on in New Zealand. Scott shares his story with us and a lot of good, solid principles based around business, adventure, and also the body, soul, and spirit. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Here he is, Mr. Scott Worthington.
You know, going back to where we started, I suppose, because I've often wondered where I got that confidence from. And I think, you know, part of it comes from the fact that, you know, as New Zealanders, you know, we're a young country and we do have that, you know, adventuring spirit. My grandfather, you know, got on a boat, one of 17 children, and had a couple of brothers, you know, die in fist fights. They were working class people in a place called Leek in England. And for a better life, he just jumped on a boat and picked a spot on the map and came to New Zealand, you know, which back then is a huge adventure. So I think that spirit, that DNA sits inside a lot of Kiwis.
All right, Brother Scott Worthington, welcome to the 3 of 7 podcast, my man.
Welcome, Matt, to New Zealand. Welcome to New Zealand.
Yeah, that's kind of where are we at, Scott? I mean, you can explain it way better than me, brother.
Okay, so we're on the North Island, and we're on the west coast in a place called Karikari. And it's west coast of New Zealand is exposed to the prevailing northwesterly winds that hit both islands. So as you can see, the coast is really rugged, and because of that, you don't get a lot of people coming out here. It's good surf, but it's pretty wild country, and so the east coast on the other side of the Pacific, which is sheltered from the prevailing winds, tends to get, you know, the people because it's safer to swim and so forth. But, you know, you're like me, Chad. This is where I like to come because it's a bit wilder and there's nobody here. And so it's rainforest. Gets a lot of rain up here in this area. And that's really why it's so beautiful, because it's untouched.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we went down to this. We're sitting here looking at this magnificent black sand beach just down the mountain from us, and we went out there yesterday, and it was like Scott said, it definitely wasn't like an American beach. Like, you know, you go on an American beach like that you wouldn't be able to see the sand because it'd be covered in umbrellas. Yeah. And you know, it was just untouched, magnificent landscape, and I think that's pretty standard overall throughout this country. It's just an absolutely amazing place, man, and thank you so much for sharing it with me, Scott.
Mate,
it's changed my life, this country, and of course I would never been able to experience it without you. It's really changed my life, man. It's magnificent on a whole nother level.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that you know, New Zealand, countries like New Zealand and America share something, and they share the fact that we're pretty young countries and that we've been populated by adventurers. You know, people that left their shores looking for a different life. And I think that spirit of, you know, giving things a go and loving the landscape and loving the land and working with the land is something both countries share. Yeah, sure, we're getting people urbanizing and stuff, but still the heart of the country, to me anyways, is based on people that are prepared to give things a go. Mm-hmm. They were when they left their shores on boats and sailed, you know, thousands of miles into the unknown. And so this rugged country, the fact that there's not many people here, is testimony to the fact that, you know, to come all the way to New Zealand on a boat back, you know, hundreds of years ago, you have to be a pretty special person.
That's it, man. That's it. I love it. Well, you know, I want to talk about you specifically, Scott. You know, you've been a tremendous influencer for me over the last 2 years pretty much of my life, not only from a mindset standpoint, but from a business standpoint, just from the standpoint of just being a good man and human being. I mean, if I'm ever struggling with anything, you're one of the first people I think of when I need to pick up the phone and maybe bounce something off of another man that I respect and honor and know is going to provide good advice. And man, you've done so much with your life in a relatively short span of time. I mean, you're not that old, and you've managed not only to be a husband, a father. You have been extremely successful in business. You're a legendary adventure runner. You walk into an outdoor store in Queenstown with Scott, and people know who he is. I mean, he's an adventure enthusiast is not quite the word. So you've done so much. I want to talk specifically first about your business days. You tell a story that has really resonated with me when you were first starting out with your business. There was a time where you had to look bigger than you really were. And that was a lesson that I've never heard from another businessman, but it ended up really working out for you, man. So I was wondering if you could just share that story with us and a little bit of the concept or thoughts behind that.
Sure.
Because it's worked for me, man. I use it all the time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so what you're alluding to is that story we were talking about when I started I had a couple of businesses, but this was a business that was an export business, and it was actually representing an American company. As you know, I've had a connection with America since I was 16, 17, was an exchange student in America. It changed my life. And anyway, so I ended up working and helping an American guy expand his business, and it started with us really implementing the same lesson, even though we didn't know it. So he came and talked to me about a product range that I was interested in, and literally gave me the impression that he was a very big, successful company and that he exported all over the world, and that I might be able to help him export the product into our region and through Asia and Australasia and so forth. And, when I finally went to visit him, I found out he was a garage, and so all of a sudden he'd painted a picture that was way bigger than the reality.
But it got you there, right?
It got me there.
That's right.
And he wasn't being dishonest or anything. He was just, being creative.
Yeah.
And so, when I then first went out and started to think about how I could do this, I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't have any staff. I didn't really have any contacts through Asia. I just looked at a map, and you know how much I like maps. Mm-hmm. So that was the easy thing for me to do. Back then, the two financial centers were Singapore and Hong Kong in Asia, and I knew that probably that's where I could find some contacts. So I don't know what made me think that I'd be more comfortable in Singapore than Hong Kong, but I did. So I decided, right, if I'm going to go over and look for potential people to represent a brand, I better make the brand sound, pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And, make it sound successful, make it sound big and so forth. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, a lot of people tend to equate success with size.
Yeah.
You can either fight that or just go with it. And I'm one person that quite often goes with things if I'm trying to, convert an opportunity. And so I booked on Orchard Road. I booked the largest hotel, the Marriott Hotel back then. It was the swankiest hotel, and I'll book that, and I'll book a big meeting room that could, probably when I got there, I didn't realize it was so big. It probably seat 200 people. And
you're just starting out, man. So this is a big deal. This is
nobody knew me. Nobody knew the brand. Nobody knew anything.
Yeah.
So
it's a large investment for you at that point to really go out on that.
I'm using all my money to scrape up a plane flight and and book this hotel and back then there was no internet or anything, so it's like, well, how do these people even find out that there's going to be this guy in town that's going to try and advertise his company, and who wants to be a distributor? So I booked a couple of magazines and put some stuff in. I went to the New Zealand consulate, and they'll often help New Zealand businesses and so forth. every which way to advertise this meeting. And I booked this hotel room for 5 days, thinking, I'll get all these people to line up and I'll, be able to interview them all and I'll have a, wonderful choice of people I can select. And, so day 3 comes along and it's about, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I hadn't seen a soul. For 3 days I'd sat in this massive room, and I'd set this desk up. I got like the Marriott to set this desk up and put a white tablecloth. And when I think back, I used to walk in through these double doors in a room that could seat at least 100 people. And it's this tiny little, thinking back, it's like the initial impression of someone walking in must have been like, what's with this guy, Anyway, so day 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I hadn't seen a soul. Not one person had turned up. Nobody had called me, nothing, Oh, okay, well, I paid the money for 5 days. I might as well sit here for 5 days. So, I'm thinking, I'd say about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, one of the hotel staff came in and, everything okay, Mr. Worthington, and I'm like, yeah, everything's okay. But really what he just sort of stayed there looking at me, and I'm thinking, well, you're not just asking me if I'm thirsty or something, So I said, yeah, like, everything's okay, mate. You can leave now. And he goes, no, we have noticed that you've sort of been in here for 3 days, and like, I don't think anyone's come in, sir, And I go, yeah, okay, you don't have to ram it home. I do understand that, And in a roundabout way, it's like, what the heck are you doing here,
Yeah.
I said, don't worry, someone will come,
Yeah.
So literally on day 4, honestly, I got to the point where I thought, yeah, what's the point in staying another day? I'll get through day 4, and I'll have breakfast if no one's called me. I'll call it quits. And 2 young guys walked in the door. And believe me, they were the absolute picture of the people that I wouldn't choose. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, I'll get some big businessman to walk in, we'll have an entourage, and, dreams are free. So, it wasn't particularly realistic. So these 2 young guys walk in, younger than me, and, hi, Mr. Worthington, we're here for the interview. So I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm shaking off 4 days of like not seeing a soul. It's I got to play the big guy now, So anyway, long story short, they had a small business and they were interested in the product line, and so I just said, okay, I'll go away and I'll consider it. I got some other proposals to consider, and they left, and it's like, well, that's going to be it. Yeah. I've only got one. So I left it a day, and on the 5th day, I asked them to come back in again, and then when we sat down and talked, and I got comfortable with them and them with me, we went out to dinner, and then I just told them, I said, look, I have to be honest, I'd love to give you a crack, and don't take this the wrong way, but you're the only dudes that turned up. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. I had to be honest in the end, but, it turned out from there to be a great business, and then as we got it going, through some of their contacts and so forth, other people got to know about the product. And at the end of the day, it was a wonderful, wonderful American product. At the heart of all this is still a product and service that I believed in, and it was going to do good things for the people that used it. Yeah, yeah. So, it was sort of fabrication in a way, but it was based on truth. So it was just making ourselves look, or myself in that stage, and the company, look successful, look big, because unfortunately, take it, good or bad, that's the way people judge a lot of things. Yeah. And you can either decide to not do it that way because it's against your ethics, maybe, I don't know. Or you can go, there's nothing wrong with that as long as in the end you're honest and you get the right result. And that's what we did. And yeah, we're still in business with those people today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see, I don't see that whole, that was a huge lesson for me being an entrepreneur. And I don't see that as being in any way, shape or form dishonest. I see that as you being confident and you just, there was no dishonesty involved. It was you had to take a risk to go and book that conference room, to travel overseas. That was a huge risk that took a lot of confidence. And, to me, it's just a major lesson learned. And gosh, we could talk about the business. I mean, with the lessons that you've learned in business, you could do a whole podcast on just that. But I want to transition into other things. and this is a perfect transition into that confidence, man. And we've talked a lot this weekend, and confidence, I think, is a big thing for you that keeps coming up. And I want you to talk about that time that your confidence was forged as a young man when you went overseas and you did your trip to Europe with $600 in your pocket, and kind of how that helped. I feel like that was a transition. That was almost your crucible as a young man, and then you came out on the other side of that with this confidence, and that's been a key part, I think, of your success throughout your life, man. So talk about that a little bit, brother.
Yeah, definitely. So, going back to where we started, I suppose, because I've often wondered where I got that confidence from. And I think, part of it comes from the fact that, as New Zealanders, we're a young country and we do have that, adventuring spirit. My grandfather, got on a boat, one of 17 children, and had a couple of brothers, die in fist fights. They were working class people in a place called Leek in England. And for a better life, he just jumped on a boat and picked a spot on a map and came to New Zealand, which back then is a huge adventure. So I think that spirit, that DNA sits inside a lot of Kiwis. So I went to the States on a American Fields scholarship, and did my last year of high school in the States, and live with families over there, and so you're having to live with different parents, different rules, different world, and you either fight it or you embrace it. And a Kiwi way is just to embrace things. It's just to when in Rome, be a Roman.
That's it.
And so that set me on the path. And when I got home after that year, I thought there's more to learning than just going to a high school. I just want to get out. And I suppose the backstory to that is my dad, just after the Second World War, and his dad, my grandfather, had come home from the World War, that my dad also decided he also wanted to explore. So he spent also 3 years cycling around Europe on a push bike, just after the war, where Europe, a lot of, the Europe was closed, a lot of Eastern Europe and so forth. So that was sort of the inspiration of why that activity. But I came home and I needed some money, and so I got a labouring job on a building with a building company. And as soon as I could, I had this target of $600. Why $600? Because that was enough for me to buy a fare on the boat on the way out to Europe. Because back then, you could fly, but most people, if you didn't have quite the money, you could take a boat. And so I thought, well, I'll just get enough money to pretty much get the fare that'll land me in Europe, and hopefully just enough to buy a bike, and then I'll just wing it from there. We'll give it a crack. So I took this boat to Europe, which is a 6-week boat, a ride up through the Panama Canal, and landed in Genoa in Italy. And I met a gentleman, lucky enough, a German guy on the boat, who helped steer me towards getting where I could get a bike for a little less money. So that was all a nice opportunity. And then I just pretty much over the next few years just explored Europe on my push bike. Went as far as tracking a lot of the stuff that my dad had done. So I went up to Hammerfest and would go back to some family we had in England when I ran out of money, and wing it, got a job in a local silk mill, and what can you do? I don't know. What do you want me to do? So, can you swing a hammer? Could you put a floor down? And I had no idea. It's like, yeah, I can do that. Cool. Yeah. And it's just like, there's the boards, there's the nails, there's the hammer, there's the tape measure. I'll work it out. Yep. And, it worked out, and they paid me the money. And so, doing that for 3 years, sort of just using resources as they came to hand, and then when they didn't have them, just looking around. And if you look around, you don't have to look too hard. There's a lot of resources around you. You just got to be confident enough to actually go and grab them. So, when I finished that, and looking back, as we talked last night, where did I get my, spirit of adventure and all that stuff? It's really from that trip. Probably started in the States. If you really want to go back, it's probably that opportunity I got to be American Field Service Scholar, and go to another country and under my own steam, without my parents or any support system, literally just have to I'm a big believer in immersion. Just immerse yourself in it. Don't get scared. Don't overthink it. Just give it a crack. And then once you're in it, that's when you start, working out what's going right, what's going wrong, how I can fix this, whatever.
That's it. Yeah, and you're forging that confidence.
Yep.
Because you're having to figure things out.
Yep.
And figure out where your resources are going to come from, and how you're going to react to certain situations.
Yep.
And so for me, man, that kind of, your experience is unique. My experience, where I forged that confidence, was SEAL training.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of parallels in the whole SEAL training or military experience to your experience. For me, it was obviously relinquishing all my assets and possessions and stepping into this arena that is SEAL training, and not knowing I didn't know how much I was going to get paid. I didn't know what my day-to-day tasks were going to be.
Yep.
And that for me was where I also forged that confidence, man. So, I think that's a wonderful challenge for every, not just every young man or woman, but for every human being. If you haven't had that experience where you just took that leap, man, and you went out on a limb for whatever the time span is. I think it needs to be I think it needs to be more than a week.
That's a good point in itself. I mean, using the time as a possible part of the journey, whatever it is, it has to be something that simply is going to take you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a big believer that you learn more out of your comfort zone than you do obviously in it. Therefore, if you're uncomfortable with a mission as an overnight mission, if that's the start of your adventuring, then that's the first one you do, a one-nighter. You don't jump into 7 nights and scare the living daylights out of yourself, and you'll never return. So then you'll never learn. So, I stayed away for a number of years, but that wasn't by design. I didn't start off and get a pen and paper and go, I'm going to be away for, 3 years or whatever it is. It was just simply that I had a plan of jumping in and giving it a go. And once you get consumed by it and you get in it, and it's a living experience.
Yes.
So you're inside this experience and you're having to react and so forth. You don't have a lot of time to reflect, but when you do, that's when you understand the lessons that you've learned, because you reflect back on it and go, oh, why am I confident now? Oh, well, I did this. I had to fend for myself, and I was lucky enough or brave enough or whatever you want to describe it to, step off that cliff.
Yep.
That's all it took, just one step.
And you said something just a minute ago, Scott. You talked about that comfort zone, man. And I want to transition into that, because one of the most unique things about you as a human being is you literally have no regard for comfort. It's amazing how much of you're a minimalist when you go out on these adventures. You want to take only the essentials.
I'm lazy.
No, you're not. You're not lazy. You have you can call. I don't even want to put a label on it. I don't want to say you're hard. It's not that you're tougher than anyone else. It's just you. It's your makeup. You have no regard for comfort. And I want to talk to you about something that we discussed earlier in the weekend, and that's complaining. Yeah. And you put complaining, and I don't want to quote you, but I think it was like this: complaining is just a person's excuse for not finding a solution.
Correct. Yeah.
And I never hear you complain.
Yeah.
And a part of that is because, again, you have no regard for solution, or you have no regard for comfort, but you also are laser focused on a solution.
Correct.
So, talk about that a little bit. What is complaining to you, and how have you reached this point that you literally never complain? It doesn't matter how hard the conditions are. It doesn't matter how harsh the weather is. Yep. It doesn't matter what nature's throwing at you, what life's throwing at you, what business is throwing at you. You don't complain.
No, and I suppose, you know, I mean, I've learned that lesson over many years, but yeah, I mean, I'm really strong on this, and I don't like people complaining, because as soon as I hear people complaining or making an excuse for why something happened and went wrong, it's just an excuse not to find a solution. And really the only way that they're going to fix that complaint, if they're really honest, is find a solution. And that solution might be just walking away from it. But, you know, so, you know, for me, people say, you know, positivity, you're positive or whatever. To me, the only way to succeed, you know, is to find the solution. I've never found anybody tell me that I'm really successful because I was negative. I'm really successful because I actually didn't find the solution. I mean, that's nonsensical. So, you know, I learned that, you know, I suppose, again, going around Europe and running out of money, or my bike breaks down and there's no tools and there's no, you know, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I can either dump the bike, or I can, you know, can sit there and complain about, you know, how this is lousy and, you know, I'm miles from anywhere, but it doesn't get me to the next town. Mm-hmm. And there's nobody around, so what am I going to do? Sit and cry? And I mean, just none of that gets me anywhere. In fact, it does the opposite. It actually tends to implode and make my anger, make my confusion, make my whatever that negative emotion is, it amplifies it. And as that amplifies, the solution is less clear and is further and further away from being found. So I've just always had a mindset that, you know, whenever something confronts me that is not comfortable, mm-hmm. It's not that I don't like comfort. It's just that, you know, maybe I put myself in those situations of discomfort because I like, you know, being out in the backcountry. But, you know, basically it's selfishness. It's like, no, I don't want to be uncomfortable. Well, there's only one way to move out of this, is find the solution. So, yeah, it does. It bugs me on lots of levels, on lots of different topics, not just the topics I'm interested in. But you hear people, and it seems to be a default position that you complain first.
Yeah.
Where what I do is my first port of call is, how do I get out of this? What's the solution? And then, you know, it doesn't take long once you're implementing that solution, because that takes time. Your focus just so quickly shifts to the positive and away from the negative. And so, yeah, I suppose, I think I jokingly said to you, I don't complain, but you know what? That's funny, because I do complain about people that complain.
Yeah.
It frustrates me that, you know, the solution is generally right there in front of them. But while they're focusing on the negative, they're never going to see the positive.
That's it, brother.
Simple.
And this ties back into, this concept ties back into so much of what I believe in and what I've implemented in my own life. Not only does it tie back into the power of the spoken word, because you are intentionally being conscious of the things that come out of your mouth by choosing not to complain. But it also ties into the fact of what benefit is there in fighting against the things that are uncomfortable or that you might not agree with. It's not going to get you anywhere, man. And the whole premise of not complaining is you choosing to focus your energy to find a solution and not to battle against the situation that might not be optimal for you at that time. So it's just, that to me brings everything just right back to those principles, man. It
is, and it's so, to me, it's so logical, and I know a lot of people haven't experienced it, and so maybe they haven't learned that lesson, but I think once you understand that, you know, I'm a big believer, there is always a solution.
Yes.
Never believe that you're in a dead end. There is always a solution. And the dead end might be turning around and going back the way you came in. That could be the solution. And I've done that on missions. You know, I told you about, you know, wanting to do this mission that I don't think anyone had ever done. And I wanted to make it doubly difficult, so I thought I'll do it in the winter and I'll snowshoe this thing over, you know. And I got to the point and I had to make the decision. It took me longer than I thought. I was in sort of waist-deep snow and thinking it wouldn't be that. The snow condition would be better than it was. And, I just ran out of food, but in my plan, I'd made what I call a point of no return. In other words, I'm either at that point and I'm in good condition food-wise and I carry on, or I'm at that point and things are not that great, and then I've got to retreat, Now, a lot of people would see that as failure or whatever, but to me, it was just like I got to that point, I looked at what I had no food left, so I knew that it was going to be 13, 14 hours snowshoeing back in the other direction with no food, or it was going to be going into the unknown, which I thought was possibly another, 10 or 12 hours, but unknown conditions versus what I knew behind me. So no, it took me like 10 seconds to make that. It was not a difficult decision because it's not in my makeup to sit there and go, oh, heck, I failed. Oh, well, God, why did I fail? Oh, it was because of the snow conditions. That was probably going to kill me. I was probably going to stand there, procrastinate, night come fall, minus 15 degrees, I just die. It's pretty dumb.
That's it.
Dumb thing to do. So, by focusing on that, and you talk about speaking it out, and you've heard me say to you before that when you came up on one of your podcasts with that saying, that mantra, it hit me, and it's just so true that actions are the reality, and so until you speak it, and so honestly, and I haven't really shared this. I shared you a bit of what I do, which is a bit crazy in the outdoors sometimes, but I remember hitting that point on my snowshoes and sitting there, and got to that point on my map, and I don't carry a GPS, so I'm doing a map and compass, and I got to the point, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm here. Okay, let's do a tally up. Okay, I got no food. Okay, I'm returning, and I stood there and I shouted and I talked to Mother Nature, and I said, you defeated me, you think? You think you defeated me. You didn't. I'm turning around, and you know what? I'm coming back. And I came back a month and a half later, and I completed that mission. So, I think that's a pretty good example of, just finding a solution. And if you want to look at it in isolation and go, oh, which you didn't get over with your snowshoes, so you've actually never done it in winter. That's right, I haven't. But I managed to still do it, and I'll go back and I'll do it in winter. And if it never happens, it never happens.
Yep. And man, what a solid principle that is that you're never at a dead end. The solution may be that you have to turn back and go the way that you came.
Yep.
So you right there, you have completely flipped that whole picture of failure. It no longer became that mission no longer became a failure, or it no longer was a failure. It became this is the solution.
Yep.
So just thinking about that and keeping in mind that there really are no dead. You're never at a dead end.
Nope.
There's just finding the solution, whether that's moving forward, whether it's going around, over, under, or turning back.
Sometimes backwards.
That's it, brother. Man, that is a solid principle, and it takes the power away from complaining, and it totally takes the power out of that word failure, and it's something that, again, it preserves that confidence that's so important, because you're not at that point, you're not beating yourself up about not making your objective, because the solution had to be to turn around, man. That's just in all aspects of everything that we've talked about. That's such a solid principle, and I hope the listeners keep that in mind in their own missions in life, whether it's relationships, business, actual adventure.
Yep.
And I want to transition real quick into adventure.
Today's episode is brought to you by ExoSkin. And let me tell you a little bit about this company. In my opinion, they make the highest quality outdoor and fitness apparel on the market today. It's all 100% made in the USA. It has rapid dry copper technology, which means that these fabrics do not retain odor. You can literally wear them for multiple missions, and you don't have to throw them in the wash after every run because they just don't stink. The fabric that Rick has designed actually channels moisture and sweat away from your skin, which keeps you dry, and you don't have to deal with chafing like you would experience with other outdoor apparel. This stuff's hands down the best on the market. They just came out with a new beanie. It's their newest piece of gear in their lineup, so now they can actually cover you from head to toe. I highly recommend it, whether you're an ultra runner, a thru hiker, a backpacker, whatever your activity may be. If it involves you moving and generating body heat, generating sweat, and you want to be as comfortable as possible and have the most functional gear that you can possibly buy, ExoSkin is for you 100%. They have provided us, as 3 of 7 podcast listeners, with a pro code. It will give you 20% off of any purchase that you make with ExoSkin. That pro code is 3 of 7. That's the number 3 of the number 7. And when you're ready to buy some ExoSkin, visit them at their website. That's exoskin.us.
Again, I talked about earlier, I mean, you understand what true adventure is. And I want you to give us your opinion on what is true adventure, Scott, to you, man?
True adventure to me is,
in a sense of being in the wilderness, I'm talking about wilderness adventure.
Well, I think the way I would explain it for me personally is because an adventure doesn't have to necessarily be in the wilderness. An adventure could easily be, being an entrepreneur and embarking on a business. For me, because I love the land, adventures for me are, literally to do with the Mother Nature, the getting out in the backcountry and so forth. But I suppose the key thing for an adventure for me to be a real adventure is it's got to be something that on the outset there is more chance of me not succeeding than succeeding. That to me is a true adventure. When I look at it and whatever that task is, there's more chance I'll probably fail, at least the first time, because I'm confident enough to know that just like that trip, there were conditions that happened in front of me that, I didn't see coming, and that could have been my own poor recon before. For whatever reason, I don't beat myself up on that. It was what it was, but it's putting myself in that position where the chances of failing are greater than succeeding. And then that puts me right at the edge of everything I've learned. And hopefully I'm going to learn new things in that because, everything's, I believe, most things are interconnected and it's like hauling in a fishing line, you haul it in, but until you hauled it in the whole way, you don't know what you got on the hook. So you just keep reeling, and that's, I think, the thing that catches people on fishing. I'm not a fisherman, but as a kid, you've done that, and that thing of reeling up, and you finally look in the water and you see that first glimmer of something's moving, and you got the resistance on the line, so you're excited. Oh, it feels big, and a number of times it comes up and being some tiny wee thing because it's just a good fighter, but it's that sort of concept of, if I put myself out on something that an average person might say is an adventure, and I looked at it and I said, no, there's nothing in there that I know I can't do. For me, it wouldn't be an adventure.
Yep.
But as soon as I look at it and go, man, there's stuff in there I'm not sure about,
Yeah.
but I'm confident enough to give it a try, that's an adventure.
Yep. And so that essentially what I hear from that, Scott, is when you hit that point, man, that's where you're sharpening yourself.
Absolutely.
So everything else up until that point is not sharpening you. But you talked about when you get on that point to where you don't really know if you can do this or not, that's where you're learning. That's where you're growing. Yep. That's where that blade is becoming sharp as a human being, man.
Absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely spot on. I mean, and obviously you go on something in an adventure or something. I'm sure when you guys went out as SEALs and you went on missions, you learn your skills and there's certain things, that became automatic in that particular mission. But then there were aspects where you literally go, this is unknown territory. But it's not. But you feel confident because you've got certain skills that you know are honed enough to put you in a position where you can sharpen them even more. And that unknown is what's going to do that. But you still got to have the basic skills. So, if I go out in the backcountry, I've got to know how to read a map. I've got to know how. But I might put myself into, some terrain that most people would say you can't navigate in there. Well, that's like red rag to a bull to me. It's like that's gonna make me go in there. Like, really? You don't think you can do it? That's just a complaint.
Yeah.
You don't know until you go in there. And if I come out and I can't do it, that's cool.
That's it,
I
bro.
worked out that I failed. That's cool.
Yep.
But the biggest failure, and I know it's a bit cliche, is not to do it at all.
Yep.
And so for me, adventure, the key element, doesn't matter it's a business venture, or I think adventure is one of those words that people tend to align with, backcountry, mountains, or just outdoor stuff. Mm-hmm. But man, starting a business is an adventure. Starting a family is an adventure. These are all things that, that you first time you do them, you don't have any experience. So you give them a go, and you come out the other side. And I'm euphoric about the success I have, if it's successful. In the fact that I conquered some of the stuff that I was wondering about because I'd never experienced.
Yeah.
So again, it's just about embracing that, and so it's a long way of getting around it. But yeah, adventure to me, whatever that field of adventure is just simply all about like reeling that fish in.
That's it. Yeah.
At least put your hook in the water, at least dangle your line in there. You never know what you're going to get on the other end of it.
And Scott, I love how you tied that back into, it doesn't matter the platform. It doesn't matter the conduit of the adventure, whether it's marriage, raising children, business. That's not what dictates true adventure. The true adventure is the sense, and I think entrepreneurs and people in business can look at that from an aspect of, man, set your goals high, man. Set your goals higher than you may not have a clear picture of how it's going to be possible to reach that goal. For instance, for me with the podcast, man, in 2020, I would like to reach 1 million people with this podcast. Yep. I don't see how that's going to be possible, but that's where I set my goal, because now I'm pushing the limits of what I think that I'm possibly capable of, and it's sharpening me. It's going to make this product better than if I would have set my goal lower at something that I knew was attainable.
Yeah, and I totally agree, and I think out of what you just said is that, what I take out of that, and I use all the time, is that one thing I know for sure, I know absolutely for sure, that if you don't have a goal of, in your case, going to a million people listening to your podcast, and you don't immerse yourself in trying to get to that goal, one thing I know is if you don't give it a go, 100% it won't happen.
100%.
That's the only thing that's 100%.
Yep.
You will consign yourself to failure. But as soon as you give it a go, you open the possibility. Now, whether you succeed, whether you get to 500,000, to me, is sort of irrelevant. Yeah. But you're on the journey. You've started it, and you are the only person that have given yourself the opportunity to do that. And as soon as you say that, no, I can't do it, I won't do it, whatever, everyone will guarantee you're right. You're 100% right. You will be a failure. You will never succeed in doing that goal. That's it. So man. You just got to do it. You just got to get out and give it a go. Yep, that's it. And just continuing on adventure, you are now a race director. You have 2 events now, the Revenant and also this 85 South that's coming up soon. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about when it comes to these 2 events. Not only the adventure aspect, the Revenant is the embodiment of your view of adventure, in my mind. It is the embodiment of it.
So I think I know why you created the event.
Yeah.
It is one, to give people the opportunity for true adventure. Is that correct? Is that the premise of it?
Absolutely. It's. I mean, the name. I purposely picked the name of the event being the Revenant. I mean, a lot of people, it just seems to be a current word because of the movie that came out. But Revenant, if you look at it in a dictionary, basically is a spirit. Or a person or something that's either come back from the dead or come back from a long absence. In other words, they've managed, it's almost like a resurrection,
Yep.
And that to me is a true spirit of adventure and how people can develop. It's putting yourself in an environment where, basing yourself on wanting to do it and dipping your feet in the water based on, can I succeed? And if I don't think I can succeed, a lot of people won't even try. So for me, as society's, got a little bit more comfort orientated, and we tend to think that the way we should be nurturing people is to protect them, almost from themselves. And I don't aspire, I don't believe in that. I believe in the opposite. You unchain people and you let them give things a go, and they learn. So the Revenant to me was looking at a lot of the sporting events that I'd done and my generation had done over the years, and seeing health and safety rules and just generally society trying to, both so-called comfort people and keep them quote-unquote safe. In my words, dumbing events down, and therefore there weren't many opportunities for people to truly have that adventure and learn in an environment where forget success, forget failure in the traditional terms of I will cross that marathon line, That's not that hard a challenge, and I don't mean that in a bad way for anybody that's finished a marathon. It's a great achievement depending where you came from. But it's an achievement that most people can do.
Yeah.
But you go to ultras that you and I do, and you do now as an elite athlete, is that you look at that line and go 100-miler, and we still know the average person goes impossible, and yet they haven't tried it. How do you come up with the conclusion that it's impossible if you've never tried anything? That you've even stepped off the line and got the boldness. So I took it one step further with the Revenant. It's like, let's create an event where even the elite literally probably won't finish. So it's about the journey. I know that, again, that's a bit of cliche, but it's about the journey and what you learn inside that journey. And you don't have to focus on it. It's like almost a bonus that you might finish in this under the 60 hours. And if you do, then that's just a measure. It's not of you being better than anyone else. It's just a measure that you've managed to hone your tools to a higher degree. And to me, then you go on to something else. It's not the end of the story. That's just yet another stepping stone.
Yep.
So for me, I take my hat off to anyone that puts a submission in, that has the courage to actually, type their name in and push send, and I get that submission and it says I'm so-and-so and I've done these few events, I'd like to give it a go. It's like, man, hats off to you right there, because that's the first and quite often the hardest step. The easiest step, believe it or not, for me, is actually doing the event.
Yeah.
It's actually getting the courage to actually push the submit button.
Yep. Yep. That's it, brother.
That's really it.
Yep. And I think there's, like you said, even if you do finish, man, there's no glory surrounding it. It just is. And there's no prizes. There's nothing like this. And guys, if you want to know more about the Revenant, if you haven't heard already me talk about it, I'm going to be linking the website into the show notes so you guys can go on and read about this event that Scott's designed. I don't want to go into the intricacies of it here. You guys can go check it out. But it's awesome, man. And the one of the things that has really impacted me about you, Scott, not only as a businessman but as a race director, is it is no small task to put on an event like the Revenant or like 85 South. But you have these ideas, and you are able to take this idea of these 2 races and bring them to fruition. You're able to take this idea and make it something tangible in a relatively short amount of time. How are you able to take this overwhelming task of creating this totally unique event and challenging event with tons of moving parts and make it something real in such a short amount of time? And how do you do that?
I think, I suppose there's multiple sort of answers to that, but I think the foundation of all of them would be, it comes back to that I don't complain and I don't find excuses. So, starting off with something like the Revenant, I put a pen to paper and sort of, this is what I like the event to look like. This is the ethos of the event. These are the details around it. So, I map the event out. And you can either sit there and then procrastinate about that and go, oh, this is going to take a lot of time. They're just excuses. They ain't getting done while you're doing nothing about it, and they ain't doing nothing while you're only thinking about it, because, using your mantra, until I put pen to paper, which is another way of speaking it out loud, I'm physically taking it. Until I do that, they're just an idea. But once I get those ideas out, to me, I work by making things happen, because I look at the alternative as just an excuse. And while I'm excusing myself that I'm too busy, I'm too that, as opposed to going, yeah, I'm busy. But look at it's 24 hours in a day. I've got to sleep 8. There is time. So that's a non-event to me. And then I got to call this person. I got to rely on that person. Well, I don't call them up and just say, can you do this for me? I call them up and say, can you do this for me? What's it going to cost? When are you going to have it done? I don't take, I'll get back to you. And if they do, if I get back to you on Wednesday, come Wednesday, if he hasn't got back to me, I call him. Because otherwise it's just an excuse. Oh, well, he must be busy. I don't want to bother him. I'm not bothering him. I'm just asking him to do what he said he'd do.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem with holding people to account for that, because I expect you to hold me account for that.
Yeah.
So it may look like that I got some of these things up in relatively short time. I don't look at it that way, because I just look at, well, there's 20 things to do. There's my list. I'll start knocking them off right away. And every time I procrastinate, it's just an excuse for not finding that solution.
Yep. So I'm hearing a process there. One is getting it out of your head, making it real to yourself, whether that's speaking it, writing it, whatever it may be. Yep. I'm hearing you talk about that list. I'm hearing breaking it down into these micro segments of what you actually have to do to make this thing real. Yep. And then I'm hearing persistence, man. You talk about making those calls and being persistent. That's essential to getting something done. And I think it's a process, man.
I think you and I talked last night about a number of different things, and again, one of the foundations I think we both agreed on. It doesn't matter what you're doing. One of the most key ingredients to get that result is consistency, and therefore, whatever you decide, in my case, don't complain, just find a solution. If I did that once or twice, it'll work for those, instances I was applying that for. But when I don't apply it, then I don't know what the result's going to be. So, in my business, before I sold the business, with dealing with customers, you had staff, and I said to them, look, we may not always have the best product. We may not always have the best price. There's a lot of things competitors might come and do better. But one thing I learned about human nature is that more people are lazy and want to complain about things and procrastinate than don't. So one of the things that we could do that I knew that other competitors would find difficult to compete long term was be consistent. So I used to say to my staff, something as simple as communication with your customer. It was like, guys, I want you to go away. I want you to prioritize the customers that are the most valuable to us in either terms of current sales and revenue or potential. And even identify the ones where you don't think there is any more potential. And we can discuss why that might be. But once we've got that list, then we've only so many hours in a day. So instead of complaining that I can't do it, let's just pick the guys that we've got to keep on board. They will get the most contact. Then there'll be the middle group. They get a bit less contact. And then that bottom group. And you know what? Whatever you decide that you got to call that customer every week or twice a week, or or contact. We used to say contact, or once a month. You better be doing that every week of every year ad infinitum.
Yep. Yep.
And that consistency eventually not only got us new customers, but you'd go around customers and they go, "I love dealing with Global. I love dealing with that company." Why? Well, their prices have gone up this year, but you know what? I can count on them. Mm-hmm. I can absolutely 100% count on their service. And so in a competitive world where I knew from time to time, our product was maybe the latest one out, so we were going to have that competitive edge. You got to be realistic. We're in a commercial world. Entrepreneurs and new developments are all over the place. So you don't have that space forever. But what you can have forever is your basic foundations on how you do business and communicate, because I'm a big believer that in business, we all represent a product, but we're really selling ourselves. We're all in the people business, in my opinion. We're selling ourselves and our integrity. And part of that integrity is you can trust us, and part of that trust comes from the fact that when I say something, I do it 100 times, not 99, not, oh God, there's an excuse why I do. No, I do it 100,
Yep.
So consistency, I think, is really, really important as a foundation to anything you do. Whatever you do, start with small steps, break it down, but just be consistent. Mm-hmm. So when I plan now, and I'd love to know more, you and I haven't talked a lot, but I imagine that, like some of the stuff I do, but amplified a lot more as a SEAL. When you guys went out, your planning would have been meticulous. Mm-hmm. As much as you still know there's going to be an unknown element, everything that's known you would have ticked off.
Yep.
I ran and worked the same way. I just take what I'm doing, I break it down, look at all the parts, and I just rack my brain until my brain is empty of what's known. And then I just have a little box on the side. There will be some unknown. Be ready.
Yep.
And again, that's one of the things that, as you know, I've tied into that Revenant, is that you guys go into the race. You're just about to do the race again this year, and you know the stuff you don't know. And that's on purpose for me, because it's like life. There's stuff you can plan for, so you take the learnings from last year's race, so you know you're going to go further, but you also know there's going to be some stuff that's just going to happen. But you'll deal with it better because you've sharpened those tools.
Yeah.
And you're not scared of the fact that there's going to be unknown. In fact, just as I said with an adventure, you embrace it. That's why I like to come, because I keep getting better, because this stuff keeps, as opposed to, my days are going back, and I was, I love running. That was my background, and started off in triathlon and marathons and stuff, and I very, very quickly got bored with going back to the same race, because these races are like a box. How many times can I run around in circles in a box? What am I going to learn? Yeah, you can get faster. Okay, I can get faster. That came pretty quickly, and a pretty dead end in terms of that. So there was no solution there. I had to get out into things that, continuously threw up that stuff that I wasn't sure about, but I was confident enough. Yep. And that was a consistency. That's what I consistently seek out.
Yep. That's another solid principle, man. So you're talking about that consistency, and being consistent, being persistent, and having also integrity. Those are all three key components of the SEAL Creed, the Navy SEAL Creed. And I want to read that to you when we're done with the interview, or let you read it, because I think you're going to see a lot of parallels in our creed as America's most elite fighting force to the principles that you're teaching right here, man. It's amazing. I want to get you real quick just to let us know What 85 South?
Yep.
What is the creed, or what hole does it fill? Why did you decide to branch off and now create this new event aside from the Revenant? I mean, I imagine they're in two different lanes.
Yeah,
so what does it feel?
Okay, they're two different lanes, and it is a long story, and it's probably another chat at some stage.
Yeah, totally.
Just in short, so 85 South was really born mainly out of the fact that I've become friends with a younger guy called Ben Lott, who was a very, very good adventure racer and an extremely good equestrian rider. And he had an unfortunate accident, and I don't want to go into that accident.
Yeah.
That's for Ben to articulate. But he had a very bad accident, and has ended up with a life-changing brain injury, which he's working on and rehabbing. And it's unfortunate in life that when a lot of people need the most support, and then people, disappear from them because all of a sudden they don't see that person. In Ben's case, that his employer, let him go, and because he'd had a stroke and he couldn't speak, and so when you need the support most, a lot of people vacate you.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were the team that came across him in this particular race, and we created a friendship. And when I saw that, what Ben was going through, and I knew his love of adventure, and I knew he'd himself, at some stage, like me, had seen the sport, possibly go down avenues that were away from the original adventuring spirit and more into a commercial spirit, which meant, just maybe dumbing the races down a little bit, just not quite being that unknown that we like in an adventure. And he needed to have a vocation. He needed a way to make money. So, I put two and two together, and we sat down, and I just said, mate, how about we put an adventure race, and, I'll help you put it on, but it's your race. And even as we sit here now, him and I have had the conversation, and, entry's open next month, and it's his race. And I've handed it over, and I said, it's your baby. You are going to run this. I'm here just now for full-on support. So, the personal motivation about why 85 South, and the key difference with 85 South as opposed to other adventure races is that all adventure races around the world are up to around 7 days, sometimes 10 days, and they'll have resupply points where you might change from one discipline to another, trek to a bike to a kayak or something, and you can resupply your food and so forth. And I've always, had a lot of respect for, the original explorers. You think about Christopher Columbus, Cummington. I know there's lots of politics around these people that colonize, but just from the adventure point of view, think of what it takes for someone to sail a boat across an ocean where, it's not that long before they thought the planet was flat. These guys had the courage to go out into these unknown places and give things a go. They didn't have a U.S. Air Force, or boat halfway across the Pacific. Go, I can resupply here, man. But carry on. These guys went into the unknown and had to literally live on the fly, and that had been lost. And so New Zealand was explored in the same way. People came here. The Maoris were the first indigenous people here. They sailed here, So they're wonderful navigators. They navigated with the stars. And they got here. They actually, in the scheme of things, in my opinion, are the greatest adventurers. Look what they did with what they knew at the time. That's an incredible achievement. So 85 South, the main difference is that it's up to 7 days with no resupply. You start on day one, you pack what you think you need, and we see you at the finish, whenever that finish might be. So that's a true component that both Ben and I are sort of bought into as getting back to the roots of things and map and compass only and all that sort of thing. And so that was this why 85 South format. But for me, why 85 South in particular was to help a friend, was to help Ben, without, I'm not a believer that you help people by giving them money or, just making it easy.
Yep.
You give people opportunities which they got to grow into and work, and you're there to assist, absolutely. So they've got an advantage over maybe someone like you or me. You just stepped into the SEALs. No one was pushing it. It was your own motivation, your own trigger. So hey, give them a hand up, but that's it. And so that's the motivation.
I love it, man.
To get help in.
I love it. And the link for 85 South, guys, will be in the show notes. It's going to be a totally unique event. I hope to be able to be a part of that event at some point, because it's just, it like you said, Scott, it hits a whole nother level of, I almost call it exploring, man, because it's true exploring.
It is.
So I love it, brother. And the last thing I want to talk about, Scott, and this is, a big part of 3 to 7 is the spiritual side, man. And there's no value in pointing out the differences in our spiritual beliefs. Yep. I think the valuable lesson is that we love each other as men, as friends. We can add value to each other in so many different ways. I view you as a mentor, and we don't have the exact same spiritual beliefs. Nope. That never stands in the way or is an obstacle. Never do you put me down because of my spiritual beliefs, and I'm the same way as you. I mean, we had some deep conversation last night about heavy spiritual topics, man, and there's so much validity in the things that you said, even though it doesn't perfectly align with my own personal beliefs. We could have that pure conversation, man. And you talked about last night how you and of course people are going to hear this and think it's crazy, but not everything we say is for everybody. But you talked about how your connection to spirit is really the dirt, man, and nature, and I think there's a lot of stuff that we talked about last night that was strong and powerful, man. So talk to us about your spiritual life, because that is a component of you as Scott Worthington, man.
Look, absolutely. And I think the first thing I'd say is that, what I've learned in 60 odd years is that whatever your belief system is, however you believe this wonderful planet operates, is that have that with conviction, have that with integrity. And when you have that, it's generally a way for people to navigate through their life in a successful manner. And that's what I respect. So when I see a particular religion, a particular belief or whatever, I just totally respect it, because I don't have to agree with it and I don't have to believe in it. But what I do believe, if that is a mechanism that allows you to walk through life and succeed in life, then that's right for you. So for me, I'm just a believer that we're just a part of the system, and what I think emotionally has nothing to do with any other organism. I don't know whether a plant thinks. I know that's a silly thing to say, but I don't know if a particular animal feels the same pain the same way I do. I don't know that. No. Some people think they do, and that's fine. If that's what they think, that's their belief. But my belief is I don't pretend to know. What I do know is that there's a system out there that works. A flower knows how to grow in spring as opposed to winter. It knows that. Now, does it know it in the same way that a human knows something? I personally don't think so. But the reality is it makes it work for itself. Mm-hmm. It works, it grows, it dies, it does its thing. So for me, we're just another part of nature. Nature's not separate from us. And I hear a lot of people often look at the world and go, if man didn't do X, but if we just left it to Mother Nature, we are Mother Nature. We are part of the system. So that's really what I mean. And I'm at my happiest, when I'm out in the mountains quite often by myself. And, I said to you, it sounds a bit weird, but, I'll talk to Mother Nature, and it's sort of, to me, the times when it's weird to say happiest, but, I'll be somewhere, and I told you, about going over that Rocky Mountain by myself on this mission, and, the weather was coming in, it was going dark, and I could see the storm coming and snow and everything, and I just stood there and looked at the weather, and I was shouting at it and saying, bring it on, you come at me, you give me as good as you can get, I'll conquer you. And that in itself, when I think about it, is really just saying that storm and me, we're one and the same. We're in the same system, and we can coexist. We can work together. I know that sounds all a bit weird. So yeah, I mean, I truly believe that I'm just part of the system, and that's why I respect it.
Yeah. But I feel like for you, Scott, and I may be totally wrong, I feel like there is a sense of nourishment that you get from spending time in nature, from spending time in this magnificent thing that you are, like you said, a part of, but is also so much bigger and more complex than you. I feel like you understand that connection, man, and I could only imagine that there is some level of nourishment when you're out there in that environment, man.
Look, totally. I mean, that's where, as I say, when I use the word when I'm happiest, it's when I feel the most complete. I mean, happiness and completion, or feeling complete, to me are the same. And I'm not as happy. There's degrees of happiness, and when I feel happy or successful or whatever, they're only a matter of degree. When I'm the most complete is when I'm, standing on a hilltop and I've got to the top. So I've done the work. I've got to the goal that I thought, and I'm standing there and I'm in nature. And it's just like I walked up the mountain because the mountain offered itself to me. I've used it. I've used that path up, or the path that I navigated. Yeah. So I didn't get up there by myself. It sounds a bit weird, doesn't it? But I mean, I didn't get up there by myself. I got up there because of the whole system. The system offered me the mountain, the rocks. I used the rocks, and it's just, that's the most complete. So
that's pretty amazing. Yeah.
To me, when I get out into those spaces, it's just the best feeling, because it's standing on my feet on the ground. Yeah. It's like plugging into a socket. You're connected. Yeah. And until you experience that. And that might be, it doesn't have to be the outdoors, it's whatever, as we talked at the start, the endeavor, it could be having your family, it could be, whatever that adventure is, once you complete it, that's where the euphoria is. You just sit there and you go, wow, job done, and for me, that just happens to be, me standing in the bush or on the mountaintop.
Yeah, I love it, brother. I love it, man. No, and Scott, I want to be respectful of your time, man. We got a bunch to do today. We're gonna end it on that, man. It's just so much packed into this episode. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Thank you so much for just being who you are, brother. For not only for providing these platforms for opportunity for individuals to sharpen themselves and come experience adventure. There's so much work, I know, that goes into that. Thank you for taking the time to build these events and to put them out and to continue to improve them. Thank you for being a mentor for me. Thank you for sharing all these life lessons with all of our listeners. It's just, it's so humbling to be able to sit here and talk to you, brother. And, yeah.
Well, I mean, let me finish up by saying that, for me, the best thing, outcome that can happen of you and I meeting is us sitting here having this podcast. Because what that tells me is that you have taken that opportunity coming out of the SEALs. You've looked, you've learned, and most importantly, you've implemented. and you wouldn't be here interviewing me, looking over Karikari Beach, and looking at the Tasman Ocean and in what is, one of the nicest places on the planet. You wouldn't be here if we hadn't connected.
That's it, brother.
So to me, you talk about achievement and where you feel happy and connected. This is an example of how that happens and what you can achieve.
Powerful, brother. That's so true, Scott. Thank you so much, my man.
Thank you, mate. Thank
this
you.
is the 3 of 7 podcast. Enough said.
This podcast was produced by Your Social Gathering. We hope you enjoyed. If you are looking to increase your digital marketing presence or elevate your digital assets, check us out at yoursocialgathering.com.